Chapter 1. The Life I Thought Was Perfect. My name is Ethan Walker, and I'm 38 years old. I was born and raised in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, where everybody seemed to know everyone else's business. My father spent 30 years working as an electrician, while my mother was a school librarian. We weren't rich, but we never went hungry. My parents taught me two simple rules: work hard and never betray the people who trust you. The irony of those words isn't lost on me now. As a kid, I dreamed of leaving our little town behind. I wanted a career, a family, and a house where laughter filled every room. Unlike many of my friends, I never chased excitement. I wanted stability. I wanted the kind of life that looked ordinary from the outside, but felt extraordinary when you lived it. After graduating from college with a degree in business administration, I landed a job at a logistics company in Chicago. I started at the bottom, working long hours coordinating freight shipments across the Midwest. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved solving problems. Over 15 years, I climbed the corporate ladder until I became an operations manager. My salary reached nearly $150,000 a year. My days started before sunrise, with conference calls, and usually ended long after dinner. The work was demanding, the pay was good, and I convinced myself it was all worth it. 5 years after moving to Chicago, I met Emily. She wasn't loud or flashy. She had a quiet confidence that made everyone around her feel comfortable. She worked as a pediatric nurse at a local children's hospital. While I spent my days worrying about deadlines and profit margins, she spent hers comforting frightened children and exhausted parents. She made the world seem softer. Our first date lasted 6 hours. We talked until the restaurant closed, then walked through the city without realizing how late it had become. Within 2 years, we were married. 3 years later, we bought a beautiful two-story house in the suburbs. People often told us we were the perfect couple. Maybe that's because they only saw the photographs. They saw vacations in Colorado, Christmas mornings beside a glowing fireplace, backyard barbecues, anniversary dinners, matching smiles. They didn't see the stress. They didn't see me answering work emails at midnight. They didn't see Emily eating dinner alone while I was still at the office. And they certainly didn't see the distance that slowly grew between us. Not because we stopped loving each other, because life became louder than our marriage. Then there was Rachel. Emily had known Rachel since they were 14 years old. They survived high school together, shared college apartments, stood beside each other at weddings, and celebrated every birthday that mattered. Rachel wasn't just Emily's best friend, she was family. She visited our house almost every weekend. She had her own coffee mug in our kitchen. She knew where we kept the spare key. She laughed with Emily in ways only lifelong friends can. At first, I barely noticed her beyond polite conversations. She worked as an interior designer, had recently gone through a painful divorce, and often joked that she had sworn off relationships forever. Emily worried about her constantly. "She's pretending she's okay," she'd tell me, "but she's lonely." So Rachel became an even bigger part of our lives. Sunday dinners, holiday parties, game nights, birthday celebrations. Sometimes Emily invited her over simply because she didn't want Rachel spending another evening by herself. Looking back now, I can point to 100 tiny moments that seemed meaningless at the time. A conversation that lasted a little too long. A compliment I shouldn't have given. A joke that crossed an invisible line. None of them felt dangerous, not individually. But betrayal doesn't begin with a kiss. It begins with boundaries so small you barely notice them disappearing. If someone had looked me in the eyes back then and said, "One day you'll destroy your marriage because of the woman sitting at your dinner table tonight," I would have laughed. I would have called them insane. Because I truly believed I was different. I believed cheating was something selfish people did. I believed I would never become one of those men. I couldn't have been more wrong. And the first mistake I made wasn't sleeping with Rachel. It was believing I was strong enough to ignore the temptation when it finally arrived. That was the beginning of everything. Chapter 2. The small changes I refuse to notice. If you ask most people when an affair begins, they'll probably tell you it starts with a kiss. They're wrong. An affair begins much earlier. It starts the moment you allow someone to occupy a place in your mind that belongs to your spouse. At least, that's how mine began. For the first 7 years of our marriage, Emily and I had a routine. Every morning we'd drink coffee together before work. She always left the house first, wearing colorful scrubs and carrying the same oversized travel mug. I'd kiss her goodbye, grab my laptop, and spend another day buried in meetings, deadlines, and endless phone calls. Life wasn't exciting, but it felt safe. Then everything changed when our company landed the biggest contract in its history. Suddenly, my workload doubled. Sometimes I worked 60 or even 70 hours a week. I told myself I was doing it for us, for the house, for our future children, for financial security. Emily supported me at first. She packed dinners when she knew I'd be staying late. She stayed awake just to ask how my day had gone. She even surprised me at the office a few times with coffee. But little by little, those moments disappeared. Not because she stopped trying, because I stopped noticing. I'd come home exhausted. She'd ask me a question. I'd answer with one word. Then I'd open my laptop again. Every night became another promise. Things will slow down next month. They never did. Meanwhile, Rachel had started rebuilding her life after her divorce. She accepted more design projects, traveled around Chicago meeting clients, and surprisingly, she seemed happier than before. Emily invited her over often. Sometimes Rachel would cook dinner while Emily finished a late hospital shift. Other times, I'd arrive home and find the two of them laughing over a bottle of wine in the kitchen. It felt completely normal. Rachel wasn't a stranger. She was practically family. She teased me about always wearing blue shirts to work. I joked that every designer secretly judged other people's furniture. Emily laughed every time. Looking back, those conversations should have stayed exactly where they were. Simple, friendly, harmless. Then one Friday evening, everything shifted. Emily called me just before 5. I have to stay for another emergency surgery, she said. It could be hours. I told her not to worry. About 30 minutes later, Rachel knocked on our front door. She had promised Emily she'd drop off a folder she'd accidentally left in her car. When I opened the door, she smiled. I guess it's just you and me. It sounded innocent, because it was. At least then. I offered her coffee. She stayed for nearly 2 hours. We talked about work, about Chicago, about growing older, about how divorce had changed her view of relationships. I used to think love was enough, she admitted quietly. Now, I think timing matters even more. I didn't know what to say, so I simply listened. When Emily finally came home, close to 10 that night, Rachel had already left. Emily thanked me for keeping her company. I smiled. She just needed someone to talk to. Emily kissed my cheek. I'm glad she has us. Those words stayed with me. She has us, not me. Us. A few weeks later, Rachel sent me a message. Can you recommend a laptop for my business? Emily said you're better with tech than she is. It seemed like a reasonable question. I answered. Then another question came. Then another. Soon, we were exchanging messages every few days. Nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate. At least that's what I kept telling myself. When Emily asked who I was texting one evening, I answered honestly. Rachel. Emily didn't even look up from her book. What does she need now? She's buying a new computer. Emily smiled. You're a lifesaver. There it was again. Complete trust. The kind of trust most people never even realize they're holding until it's gone. If Emily had looked through our messages that night, she wouldn't have found flirting. She wouldn't have found secrets. She would have found ordinary conversations. But there was one thing she couldn't have seen. I had started looking forward to Rachel's messages, and that was the first feeling I should have been afraid of. Chapter 3. Crossing the line without realizing it. People imagine betrayal as a single moment. One decision, one kiss, one terrible night. But that's not how it happened. For me, it happened so slowly that I didn't realize I had crossed the line until I was already standing on the other side. After Rachel and I started texting more often, our conversations became part of my daily routine. Most of them were completely ordinary. She would ask if I knew a good restaurant downtown. I'd recommend one. She'd send me a picture of paint samples for a client's house and ask which color looked better. I'd jokingly tell her my opinion didn't matter because Emily had always been the one with good taste. Sometimes we talked about work, sometimes about sports, sometimes about nothing at all. There was never anything romantic, at least, not in words. But something else had changed. She had become the first person I wanted to tell whenever something good happened. When I closed a big contract at work, I texted Rachel before I even called my wife. When she replied, "I knew you'd pull it off," I smiled more than I should have. That should have scared me. Instead, I convinced myself it meant nothing. Emily never questioned me. She trusted me completely. If my phone buzzed while we watched television, she'd simply ask, "Work?" Sometimes it was. Sometimes it wasn't. I hated lying, so I didn't. I simply stopped telling the whole truth. That's the strange thing about dishonesty. It rarely starts with false words. It starts with missing words. Around that time, Rachel invited both of us to see the apartment she had just finished renovating. Emily was called into the hospital for an unexpected overnight shift. She felt terrible canceling. "You should still go," she told me. "Rachel has been working on that place for months." I hesitated. "It'll be weird." Emily laughed. "She's my best friend, Ethan, not a stranger." So I went. The apartment looked incredible. Modern furniture, warm lighting, large windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Rachel seemed proud of every detail. She walked me through each room, explaining why she had chosen certain colors and materials. I honestly admired her talent. When the tour ended, she opened a bottle of wine. "One glass," she said, "to surviving another renovation." I agreed. We sat on her balcony as the city lights flickered beneath us. For the first time, there were no interruptions, no deadlines, no hospital calls, no television in the background, just conversation. She asked me something no one had asked in years. "Were you always this serious?" I laughed. "I wasn't." "So what happened?" I thought about it. "I guess life." She nodded slowly. "I missed the version of myself before my divorce." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar. And that's what frightened me later. Because familiarity creates closeness. Closer than either of us had intended. When I finally drove home that night, Emily was already asleep. She had left a note on the kitchen counter. "Dinner is in the fridge. Love you." I stood there staring at those 3 words. Love you. She had spent 12 exhausting hours caring for sick children. And she still thought about making sure I had dinner. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt guilty. Not because I had cheated. I hadn't. But because, for the first time in my marriage, I had enjoyed another woman's company more than I wanted to admit. That night, lying beside my sleeping wife, I made myself a promise. I would create some distance. I would stop texting Rachel so often. I would remember who I was, who I had promised to be. It sounded simple, but temptation rarely announces itself as danger. More often, it disguises itself as friendship, and I was already too blind to see the difference. Chapter 4. The Excuses. We tell ourselves, "I wish I could tell you I kept that promise. I wish I could say I created distance, focused on my marriage, and everything returned to normal." But that isn't what happened. The truth is, I broke my promise almost immediately, not in some dramatic way, not with a secret date or a stolen kiss. I simply answered the next message Rachel sent me, then the one after that, and the one after that. Each time, I told myself the same thing. It's just a conversation. That's how people justify the wrong choices they aren't ready to admit are wrong. A few weeks later, our company announced a major restructuring. Departments were being merged. Managers were expected to deliver higher profits with smaller teams. Everyone was under pressure. For the first time in my career, I wasn't sure my position was secure. I stopped sleeping well. I woke up at 3 in the morning thinking about budgets, layoffs, and impossible deadlines. Emily noticed. She always noticed. One evening, she sat beside me on the couch and gently placed her hand over mine. Ethan, you don't have to carry everything alone. I forced a smile. I'm fine. She looked into my eyes for several seconds. No, you're pretending to be. I changed the subject. That became my new habit. Whenever Emily wanted to talk about feelings, I found something else to discuss. Work, bills, weekend plans, anything except what was actually happening inside me. Rachel was different. She never pushed. She simply listened. One afternoon she texted me. Long day? I answered without thinking. You have no idea. That simple exchange turned into nearly an hour of messages. I told her about the pressure at work, about my fear of failing, about how exhausted I felt, things I hadn't even told my own wife. Rachel replied with something that stayed in my head for days. You spend your whole life taking care of everyone else's problems. Who takes care of you? No one had asked me that before. At least, it felt that way. Looking back now, I know Emily had asked the same question many times. I just hadn't been listening. One Friday evening, Emily worked another double shift at the hospital. Rachel called me unexpectedly. I need a favor. Her voice sounded frustrated. One of her clients had cancelled a project after weeks of planning, and she needed help moving some furniture before another showing the next morning. It seemed harmless. She lived only 20 minutes away. I drove over after work. We spent nearly 2 hours carrying boxes, assembling shelves, and moving heavy furniture from one room to another. When we finally finished, we were both exhausted. Rachel laughed. I owe you dinner. I shook my head. You don't owe me anything. She insisted anyway. We ordered takeout and sat on the floor because the dining table was still covered with blueprints. For a while, we talked about ordinary things, movies, travel, music. Then the conversation changed. She looked at me for a long moment. You know, I've never seen anyone work as hard as you do. I shrugged. It's just my job. No, she smiled softly. It's who you are. I didn't answer, not because I agreed, because hearing those words felt good. Too good. When I got home that night, the house was quiet. Emily had left another handwritten note beside the coffee machine. Don't forget breakfast tomorrow. I made your favorite blueberry pancakes. Love you. I stood there holding that note. Then I remembered something. Rachel had thanked me for helping her. Emily had thanked me for simply existing. One woman appreciated what I did, the other appreciated who I was. Somehow, I failed to see the difference. Instead of recognizing how lucky I was, I focused on how understood I felt somewhere else. That was the lie I started believing. Not that Emily loved me less, but that Rachel understood me more. And once you begin comparing your spouse to someone outside your marriage, you're already walking toward a place that's very difficult to come back from. Chapter 5. The night, everything began to change. Looking back, there wasn't a single moment I can point to and say, that was the exact second I ruined my marriage. There were dozens of moments, small ones, quiet ones, the kind that seem harmless until you connect them all together. By early autumn, my routine had become painfully predictable. Wake up before 6, fight traffic into downtown Chicago, spend 10 or 12 hours solving problems that never seem to end, drive home exhausted, eat dinner, answer more emails, sleep, repeat. Emily's schedule wasn't much easier. As a pediatric nurse, she often worked 12-hour shifts. Some weeks we barely saw each other while we were both awake. We weren't arguing, we weren't angry, we were simply living beside each other instead of with each other. One Saturday morning, Emily surprised me with an idea. Let's go away next weekend. I looked up from my laptop. Where? I don't care. A cabin, a hotel, anywhere. She smiled hopefully. I just miss you. For a moment, I almost closed my computer. I almost said yes. Then my phone rang. It was my boss. A major client had discovered a shipping error that threatened a multi-million-dollar contract. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. My entire weekend disappeared before it even began. I looked back at Emily. I'm sorry. I can't. The smile slowly faded from her face. It's always work. I hated hearing those words because they were true. I'll make it up to you. She nodded. But this time, she didn't say, I know. She simply walked upstairs. That silence hurt more than any argument could have. The next afternoon, while I was sitting alone in my office, Rachel sent me a message. Coffee? Normally I would have said no, but after the conversation with Emily, I didn't want to sit alone with my thoughts. We met at a small cafe a few blocks from my office. She immediately noticed something was wrong. You look exhausted. I laughed quietly. I feel worse. She didn't ask complicated questions. She simply listened while I talked. About work, about pressure, about disappointing Emily. When I finished, she stirred her coffee for a few seconds. You know, you always talk about taking care of everyone else. But nobody seems to be taking care of you. There it was again, the sentence I'd heard before. This time, instead of rejecting it, I believed it. That belief became dangerous, not because Rachel manipulated me. She didn't. She genuinely cared about me as a friend. The problem wasn't her, the problem was me. I had started looking for comfort in the wrong place. Comfort became habit. Habit became attachment. And attachment slowly became something neither of us was willing to name. A few days later, Emily told me she had volunteered for an extra weekend shift. I figured you were working anyway. She tried to sound casual, but I heard the disappointment beneath her words. She had stopped asking me to choose us. She had started expecting me not to. That realization should have broken my heart. Instead, I buried myself even deeper in work, because work was easier than facing the damage I had already caused. Late that Friday evening, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. I had a terrible day. Without thinking, I replied, Want to talk? She answered almost immediately, Only if I'm not bothering you. I looked toward the living room. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch after another 12-hour shift. The television was still on. A blanket covered her shoulders. She looked peaceful. She looked safe. She trusted me enough to fall asleep while I sat only a few feet away. I picked up my phone again. You're not bothering me. I walked outside onto the back porch so I wouldn't wake my wife. Rachel called. We talked for nearly an hour, mostly about her difficult client, about work, about life, nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate. And yet, when I finally hung up, I realized something that sent a chill through me. The longest conversation I had that entire week wasn't with my wife, it was with her best friend. That should have been the warning. Instead, I convinced myself it meant nothing. Sometimes the biggest mistakes in life aren't made in moments of passion. Sometimes they're made the moment you stop recognizing where your loyalty belongs. And I was getting closer to that moment than I ever wanted to admit. Chapter 6. The line finally started to blur. People often ask me if I ever felt guilty before the affair became physical. The answer is yes, every single day. Guilt has a strange way of warning you long before disaster arrives. The problem is, you can learn to ignore it. After that phone call with Rachel, something changed between us. Not because either of us said it out loud, because silence began to carry more meaning than words. We started talking almost every day, sometimes only for a few minutes, sometimes for an hour. If one of us had a difficult day, the other was usually the first to know. Looking back now, I realized something painful. Rachel knew what kind of week I was having before my own wife did. That wasn't Emily's fault. It was mine. I had stopped letting her in. One Tuesday afternoon, my boss announced that several management positions would be eliminated before the end of the year. No names were mentioned. Everyone became nervous. When I left the meeting, I sat alone in my car for almost 20 minutes. I couldn't bring myself to drive home. I felt like I was failing at everything: work, marriage, life. My phone buzzed. It was Rachel. Everything okay? I stared at the screen. How did she know something was wrong? Then I remembered. I had mentioned the meeting the day before. Emily didn't even know it had happened. Rachel did. I answered, "Not really." A minute later, she replied, "I'm nearby. Want to grab coffee?" I hesitated. I knew I should say no. Instead, I typed one word: "Sure." She was already waiting when I arrived. She smiled the moment she saw me. "You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world." I laughed. "It feels that way." For almost an hour we talked. Not about us, about life, about fear, about growing older, about wondering whether all the sacrifices were worth it. When we stood to leave, she looked at me and said quietly, "I believe in you, Ethan." Such a simple sentence. Emily had probably said those same words dozens of times over the years, but hearing them from someone new felt different. Not because they meant more, because I had stopped appreciating the person who had always believed in me. That evening, I drove home carrying flowers for Emily. I felt guilty. I wanted to remind her that I loved her. She smiled when she opened the door. "They're beautiful." She wrapped her arms around me. For a brief moment, everything felt normal again. We ate dinner together, we laughed, we even planned to spend Sunday together without work or distractions. I thought maybe we had found our way back. Then my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. Rachel. Emily glanced toward it. "Aren't you going to answer?" I picked up the phone. "It's nothing important." For the first time, that wasn't true. It wasn't work. It wasn't an emergency. It was a message I didn't want my wife to ask about. Not because it contained anything inappropriate, because I suddenly realized how often Rachel's name appeared on my screen. Emily didn't seem suspicious. She trusted me too much to be suspicious. That trust should have made me stop. Instead, I silenced the phone and slipped it into my pocket. A few days later, Rachel invited both of us to a small gathering at her apartment. Emily wanted to come. She really did. But just hours before we were supposed to leave, the hospital called. A bus accident had filled the emergency department with injured children. She looked at me while putting on her shoes. "I'm so sorry. You should still go. I'll explain everything to Rachel later." I looked at her for a moment. "We can both stay home." She shook her head. "No. She'll be disappointed." Then she smiled. "And honestly, I trust you." Those 3 words hit me harder than anything else. I trust you. If only she had known how much those words should have frightened me. I arrived at Rachel's apartment alone. There were about a dozen people there. Designers, neighbors, friends, nothing unusual, nothing secret. We laughed. We talked. Hours passed. One by one, people started leaving. Around midnight, Only Rachel and I remained. She began cleaning empty glasses from the table. I'll help, I said. We worked quietly in the kitchen. At one point, we both reached for the same glass. Our hands touched. Neither of us pulled away immediately. It lasted only a second, maybe two. Then we looked at each other. No words, no kiss, no confession, just a silence that suddenly felt different from every silence before. I smiled awkwardly and stepped back. I should get home. Rachel nodded. Yeah, you probably should. I drove home with both hands gripping the steering wheel. I kept replaying those 2 seconds in my mind. Nothing had happened, and yet everything had changed, because for the first time, I couldn't honestly tell myself that what existed between us was only friendship. I hadn't crossed the line, but I was standing so close to it that one more step would be enough. Chapter 7. The decision I should have made. I barely slept after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel standing in her kitchen. I remembered the silence, the way we looked at each other. The moment our hands touched, nothing had happened, but my mind kept asking the same question. What if it had? I hated that question because I didn't know the answer. The next morning, I woke up before Emily. She was still asleep, her hair covering half her face, breathing softly like she always did after a long shift. I watched her for several minutes. This was the woman who had stood beside me for nearly 10 years, the woman who celebrated every promotion, the woman who held my hand when my father passed away, the woman who never stopped believing in me, even when I doubted myself. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. She smiled without opening her eyes. "Good morning," she whispered. At that moment, I made another promise to myself. This ends today. No more unnecessary texts, no more coffee, no more private conversations, no more chances to make a mistake. For the first time in months, I felt certain I could fix everything. Then life reminded me how easy promises are and how difficult they are to keep. That afternoon, I blocked Rachel's number. It felt dramatic, almost childish, but I didn't trust myself anymore. I knew distance was the only thing that could save my marriage. For nearly 3 days, I heard nothing. No messages, no calls, no temptation. I started talking more with Emily. We cooked dinner together one evening. We took a long walk through our neighborhood. For the first time in months, we laughed without checking our phones. I thought maybe I had escaped before it was too late. Then, Saturday afternoon arrived. Emily was grocery shopping. I stayed home to finish mowing the lawn. A car pulled into our driveway. I looked up. Rachel stepped out. She looked confused more than angry. I walked toward her. "What are you doing here?" She crossed her arms. "I think the better question is why you blocked me." I looked around instinctively, hoping Emily wouldn't return yet. "I can't do this anymore," she frowned. "Do what?" "This." She stared at me. "We're friends." "No." I shook my head slowly. "We stopped being just friends a while ago." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked down. "I was hoping you wouldn't say that." So was I. The silence between us felt heavier than ever. Then she asked the question that changed everything. "Are you saying you have feelings for me?" I should have answered immediately. I should have said no, even if I wasn't completely sure. Instead, I hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment. When she looked back at me, there were tears forming. I've been trying not to admit it either. Hearing those words should have made me walk away. Instead, I stood there frozen. Two people, one driveway, a lifetime of trust hanging by a thread. "I love my wife," I finally said. "I know," Rachel whispered. "I love her too." And that was the tragedy. She wasn't just another woman, she was Emily's best friend, The person Emily trusted almost as much as she trusted me. Rachel wiped a tear from her cheek. This can't happen. No, it can't. She turned toward her car. Before getting inside, she looked back one last time. We should never see each other alone again. I nodded. I agree. She drove away. I stood in the driveway for several minutes, convinced the worst was over. I believed we had done the right thing. I believed admitting the truth had saved us from making an unforgivable mistake. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because sometimes, recognizing the fire isn't enough. If you keep standing close to the flames, eventually, you're going to get burned. Chapter 8. The night I failed, for almost 2 weeks, Rachel and I kept our promise. We didn't meet, we didn't text, we didn't call. If Emily mentioned Rachel, I simply nodded and changed the subject. On the surface, everything looked normal again. Emily seemed happier. We started eating dinner together more often. We watched movies on Friday nights. One Sunday morning, we even drove out to a small farmer's market and spent the afternoon wandering through the stalls, laughing over homemade jams and fresh pastries. For the first time in months, I felt like I had my wife back, but temptation has a way of waiting until you lower your guard. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I was getting ready to leave the office when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Ethan. I recognized Rachel's voice immediately. I know I shouldn't be calling. I lost my phone a few days ago. This is my work phone. I closed my eyes. Rachel, I just need 10 minutes. Please. I should have ended the call. Instead, I asked the question that changed everything. Is everything okay? She let out a shaky breath. No. My mother was admitted to the hospital this morning. My sister is out of state. I don't know who else to talk to. There was real fear in her voice. Not manipulation, not flirting, just fear. I couldn't ignore it. I'll come. Those two words sealed my fate. When I arrived at the hospital, Rachel was sitting alone in the waiting area. Her eyes were red. She looked exhausted. The moment she saw me, she stood up and hugged me. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't planned. It was simply the embrace of someone who felt overwhelmed. Still, I held her a little longer than I should have. Her mother was stable. The doctors believed she would recover. After several hours, Rachel finally relaxed. I don't want to go home yet, she said quietly. I just need some air. We walked to a small park across the street from the hospital. It had started raining again, light rain, the kind that barely feels cold. We sat on a bench beneath a large oak tree. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Rachel looked at me. I tried to stay away. So did I. I kept thinking about that day at your house. I stared at the wet pavement. So did I. She smiled sadly. I hate this. I know. I never wanted to hurt Emily. Neither did I. Those words were true. Every single one of them. That was the cruelest part. Neither of us had planned to betray her, but intentions don't erase consequences. Rachel looked at me with tears in her eyes. I think we're lying to ourselves. I didn't answer, because I knew she was right. For months we had called it friendship, then comfort, then confusion, anything except what it had become. The rain grew heavier. She reached for my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. For several seconds, we simply sat there. Two people saying nothing, knowing everything. Rachel whispered, "This is wrong." I nodded. "It is." She looked into my eyes. "So why can't I walk away?" I wish I could tell you I stood up. I wish I could tell you I got into my car and drove straight home to my wife. I wish I could tell you that love won. But that's not the truth. The truth is, I leaned toward her. She leaned toward me. And for the first time, we kissed. It wasn't passionate, it wasn't dramatic, it lasted only a few seconds. But in those few seconds, 10 years of trust shattered. The moment it ended, Rachel stepped back immediately. Her face turned pale. Oh my God, what have we done? Neither of us had an answer, because there wasn't one. There was only silence, the kind of silence that follows a decision you know you can never take back. I drove home in complete disbelief. My lips still remembered the kiss. My conscience already carried the weight of it. When I opened the front door, Emily was standing in the kitchen making dinner. She smiled the moment she saw me. Perfect timing. I made your favorite pasta. Then she walked over, wrapped her arms around me, and kissed the same lips that had betrayed her less than an hour earlier. At that moment, I realized something I would never forget. The hardest part of cheating isn't hiding it from the person you love. The hardest part is looking into their eyes while they have absolutely no reason to doubt you. Chapter 9. Living with the secret. People think the hardest part of cheating is getting caught. It isn't. The hardest part is waking up the next morning and pretending nothing happened. That's exactly what I did. I opened my eyes before sunrise. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. Then I remembered the kiss. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I turned my head and looked at Emily sleeping beside me. She looked peaceful. One hand rested on my pillow, just as it had almost every night since we got married. She had no idea that the man lying next to her had become someone she would never recognize. I quietly slipped out of bed and went downstairs. I stood in the kitchen, staring out the window with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. I kept asking myself the same question. How did I become this person? There was no good answer, only 100 small choices that had led me here. Emily came downstairs a few minutes later, still wearing one of my old college sweatshirts. She smiled. You're up early. I couldn't sleep. She walked over and kissed my cheek. You've been stressed lately. Maybe we should take that trip I wanted. I forced a smile. Yeah, I'd like that. The lie tasted bitter, because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't stressed because of work anymore. I was stressed because I had betrayed the woman standing right in front of me. The entire weekend felt like a performance. We went grocery shopping, we cleaned the house, we ordered pizza, and watched an old comedy we had seen a dozen times before. Emily laughed at all the same scenes. I laughed too. But every laugh felt fake. Every smile felt stolen. Sunday evening, my phone vibrated. My heart stopped. Rachel. The message contained only 6 words. We need to talk, please. I stared at the screen for almost a minute. Then I locked my phone without replying. Emily noticed. Everything okay? I nodded too quickly. Just work. She didn't question me. She never questioned me. That made everything worse. Monday morning, Rachel called while I was driving to the office. I ignored it. She called again and again. Finally, I answered. What? Her voice sounded broken. I can't do this. Neither can I. Ethan, I haven't slept. I keep seeing Emily's face. So do I. We made a mistake. I know. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, We have to tell her. The words hit me like ice water. No, we can't. Why not? Because it would destroy her. Rachel answered quietly. It already has. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. No, it only happened once. It'll never happen again. We can end this right now. She didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Can you honestly promise me that? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because deep down, I didn't know if I could. That terrified me. The call ended without a goodbye. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on work. Numbers blurred together. Meetings passed without me hearing a single word. Around lunchtime, my boss called me into his office. Ethan, you've made 3 major mistakes this week. That's not like you. Is everything all right? I almost laughed. No, nothing was all right, but I simply nodded. I'm just tired. He looked unconvinced. Take a few days off. You've earned them. I thanked him and left. Driving home early should have been a relief. Instead, I felt trapped. I parked a few houses away from mine and sat in silence. I looked at the wedding ring on my finger. I'd worn it every single day for almost a decade. It had become so familiar that I barely noticed it anymore. Now it felt heavier than it ever had before. Not because the ring had changed, because I had. When I finally walked through the front door, Emily ran toward me with unexpected excitement. You won't believe it. She wrapped her arms around me before I could even speak. I got promoted. I'll be supervising the pediatric unit starting next month. She was smiling so brightly that tears had filled her eyes. I hugged her. I told her how proud I was. Every word was true. But while she celebrated the happiest moment of her career, I was standing there carrying the darkest secret of my life. And for the first time, I realized that secrets don't stay buried forever. Sooner or later, they always find their way into the light. Chapter 10. The affair truly began. People like to believe there's a point where you can still turn back. Maybe there is. Maybe mine came and went long before I ever noticed it. After the kiss, Rachel and I promised it would never happen again. We both meant it. At least, I think we did. For several days, we avoided each other completely. No messages, no calls, no excuses. I tried to focus on Emily. She deserved that. She deserved all of me. Instead, she was getting whatever was left after my guilt had consumed everything else. Emily threw herself into her new position at the hospital. She came home excited, telling me about the nurses she would supervise and the improvements she wanted to make in the pediatric unit. I listened. I smiled. I congratulated her. But she noticed something. One evening, while we were washing dishes together, she turned off the water and looked directly at me. Ethan, are you unhappy? The question caught me off guard. What? You've been somewhere else lately. You're here, but you're not really here. I forced a laugh. It's just work. She didn't smile back. I know you. I can tell when you're hurting. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to confess right there in our kitchen. I imagined falling to my knees and admitting what I had done. But then I imagined the look on her face, the pain, the disbelief, the complete destruction of the life we had built together. So I stayed silent. That silence became another betrayal. A week later, my company sent me to Milwaukee for a 2-day logistics conference. It was the first business trip I'd taken in almost a year. Emily helped me pack my suitcase the night before. Before I left, she slipped a handwritten note into my laptop bag. I know you'll find this eventually, she said with a smile. You always do. I kissed her goodbye and drove north. The conference itself was exactly what you'd expect. Long presentations, networking events, hotel coffee that tasted terrible, nothing memorable. Until the first evening. Around 6 o'clock, I received a message from Rachel. I didn't know you were in Milwaukee. I frowned. How did you know? She replied almost instantly. I'm here meeting a client. I saw your company name on the conference schedule. I stared at the screen. Out of all the cities, out of all the weeks, she happened to be there too. It felt impossible. I should have ignored the message. Instead, I answered, Small world. A minute later, another message appeared. Can we talk? Just once. We need closure. Closure. That word sounded safe, responsible, mature, not dangerous. I convinced myself that one honest conversation would finally put an end to everything. I agreed to meet her in the hotel restaurant. Public place, plenty of people around. No chance of making another mistake. At least, that's what I told myself. When Rachel walked in, she looked as nervous as I felt. She sat across from me. For several minutes, neither of us touched the menus. I've missed you, she admitted quietly. I looked away. You shouldn't say that. I know. I just wanted to be honest. I sighed. This has to end. She nodded. It does. For the first half hour, we talked about Emily, about how much she meant to both of us, about how guilty we felt, about how the kiss had changed everything. It almost felt like goodbye. Then the conference attendees began filling the restaurant. The noise grew louder. Rachel looked around. I can't even hear you. There's a quieter lounge upstairs. I knew I should refuse. Instead, I followed her. The lounge was nearly empty. Soft music played through hidden speakers. Rain tapped against the large windows overlooking the city. We sat on opposite ends of a couch, trying to keep our distance, trying to pretend we were stronger than we really were. Rachel looked at me with tears in her eyes. I hate myself. So do I. I never wanted this. Neither did I. She reached for my hand. This time, I didn't stop her. We sat there in silence, two broken people pretending they were looking for an ending. In reality, we were creating a beginning. She leaned toward me. I should have stood up. I should have walked away. Instead, I kissed her again. Longer this time. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke. We already knew. This wasn't a mistake anymore. It wasn't one stolen kiss born from confusion. It was a choice, a terrible, selfish choice. That night, I followed her to her hotel room. I'm not going to describe what happened behind that door. The details don't matter. What matters is this. I betrayed my wife in the deepest way a husband can. When I left Rachel's room before sunrise, I caught my reflection in the elevator mirror. For a moment, I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. He looked like me. He wore my suit. He carried my wedding ring. But he wasn't the man Emily had married. He was someone else, someone capable of destroying everything he claimed to love. And as the elevator doors opened, I had no idea that the consequences of that one night were already beginning to unfold. Chapter 11. A Double Life. When I returned to Chicago, Emily was waiting for me at the front door. She smiled the way she always did after one of my business trips. There you are. Before I could set my suitcase down, she wrapped her arms around me. I missed you. I missed you too, I replied. The words came out automatically. Part of me meant them. Another part of me knew I no longer deserved to say them. She pulled back and laughed. I made your favorite pot roast. I figured hotel food couldn't compete. I forced a smile. You were right. We ate dinner together while she told me stories about the hospital. One of the children in her unit had finally been discharged after months of treatment. Emily's eyes lit up as she described the goodbye celebration the nurses had organized. She loved her job, not because it paid well, because she genuinely cared about people. As I watched her talk, one thought kept echoing in my mind. She deserves a better husband than me. That thought followed me everywhere, at work, at home, even in my dreams. For several days, Rachel and I didn't communicate. I assumed we both understood that what had happened in Milwaukee could never happen again. I wanted to believe it had been an isolated moment, a terrible mistake that would remain buried forever. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone vibrated. It was Rachel. Can we talk? I stared at the message. I knew I shouldn't answer, but curiosity is a dangerous thing, I replied. About what? She didn't respond with a text. She called. Ethan. Her voice trembled. I don't think I can pretend nothing happened. We agreed we'd move on. I know. But every time Emily smiles at me, I feel sick. I closed my office door. So do I. We have to stop. I've been trying. So have I. There was another long silence. Then she said something I hadn't expected. I think I'm falling in love with you. My heart stopped. No, Rachel, don't say that. It's the truth. I rubbed my forehead. This isn't love. It's guilt. It's loneliness. It's confusion. She let out a quiet breath. Maybe, but it feels real. I ended the call a few minutes later. Not because I wanted to, because I knew continuing the conversation would only make everything worse. That evening, I deleted every message between us. Hundreds of conversations disappeared in seconds. Looking at the empty screen gave me a strange sense of relief, as if deleting the evidence could somehow erase what we'd done. It couldn't. The memories remained. A week later, Emily suggested inviting Rachel over for dinner. The moment she said Rachel's name, I felt my stomach tighten. I haven't seen her in weeks, Emily said. She's been avoiding me. I looked down at my plate. Maybe she's just busy. Emily frowned. That's not like her. I'll call her. I wanted to tell Emily not to. I wanted to invent an excuse. Instead, I stayed silent. Friday evening arrived. Rachel knocked on our front door at exactly 6 o'clock. When Emily opened it, the two of them hugged each other tightly. I've missed you, Emily said. Rachel smiled. I've missed you too. Then Rachel looked past her. Our eyes met for only a second. It was enough. No one else noticed. But we both did. Dinner was one of the longest evenings of my life. Emily laughed. Rachel laughed. I laughed when I was supposed to. Inside, I felt like I was drowning. Every casual conversation felt dangerous. Every glance felt suspicious, even though no one suspected a thing. At one point, Emily stood up. I'll grab dessert. She disappeared into the kitchen. Rachel and I were alone for less than 30 seconds. Without looking directly at me, she whispered, We can't keep doing this. I answered just as quietly, I know. Emily returned carrying a homemade apple pie. She placed it on the table with a proud smile. I've been baking this all afternoon. Rachel looked at her. You always take such good care of people. Emily laughed. I try. Rachel lowered her eyes. So do you. There was sadness in her voice that only I understood. Later that night, after Rachel left, Emily curled up beside me on the couch. I feel better. Why? Because it finally feels like everything's getting back to normal. I wrapped my arm around her. She rested her head on my shoulder. Normal. That word almost broke me. Because our life looked normal from the outside. But underneath it, I was living two completely different lives. One with the woman who trusted me completely, and another built on lies that grew heavier every single day. For the first time, I began to realize that keeping the secret wasn't protecting my marriage. It was slowly destroying it from the inside. Chapter 12. The first crack. There's a moment in every lie when you realize you're no longer controlling it. The lie begins controlling you. That's exactly where I found myself. After Rachel came over for dinner, I told myself we had done the right thing. We had acted like nothing had happened. Emily hadn't noticed anything unusual, but pretending was becoming harder every day. I wasn't just hiding an affair anymore. I was hiding who I had become. For the next 2 weeks, Rachel and I barely spoke. If she texted, I answered with 1 or 2 words. Sometimes I didn't answer at all. She seemed to understand, or maybe she was trying as hard as I was to bury what we'd done. Emily, on the other hand, seemed happier than she had been in months. She loved her new role at the hospital. She came home with stories about helping young nurses, comforting worried parents, and celebrating small victories with children who had finally recovered. Watching her smile hurt more than any argument ever could. Because every time she smiled at me, I knew I didn't deserve it. One Thursday evening, Emily walked into my home office, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She placed one beside my laptop. I miss this. I looked up. Miss what? You. She smiled gently. We live in the same house, but sometimes it feels like you're somewhere else. My heart sank. I'm sorry. She reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. I don't want an apology. I just want my husband back. After she left the room, I sat there staring at my computer screen for almost 20 minutes. I hadn't written a single email. I hadn't read a single report. Her words echoed in my head. I just want my husband back. The truth was, I wasn't sure that man still existed. The following Monday, something happened that shook me more than I expected. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed. Emily. She almost never called me during work unless it was important. I excused myself and answered, "Hey, everything okay?" Her voice sounded calm. "Yeah." I was just wondering, have you talked to Rachel lately? Every muscle in my body tightened. Not really. Why? There was a short pause. I don't know. She's been acting strange. She cancelled lunch with me twice. And when I finally saw her yesterday, she barely looked me in the eyes. I swallowed hard. Maybe she's just stressed. Maybe, Emily sighed. I hope she's okay. After we hung up, I couldn't concentrate for the rest of the day. Rachel wasn't pulling away from Emily because she was busy. She was pulling away because guilt was destroying her, and guilt has a way of making people do unpredictable things. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I found Rachel waiting across the street. She wasn't supposed to be there. She walked toward me slowly. "We need to talk." I looked around nervously. "We agreed not to do this." "I know, but I can't keep pretending. There has to be an end. There will be. I just don't know how." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Cars passed by. People hurried home from work. No one paid any attention to us. Then Rachel looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm thinking about telling her." The words hit me like a freight train. "No, you can't. She deserves the truth." I shook my head. "If you tell her now, it won't just destroy our marriage. It'll destroy her friendship with you." Rachel wiped away a tear. "It already has." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't, because she was right. The friendship Emily believed she still had already been broken the moment we betrayed her. Rachel took a deep breath. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself." She turned and walked away before I could answer. I stood there, watching her disappear into the crowd. For the first time, I realized the affair wasn't ending, it was falling apart. And when something built on lies begins to collapse, it rarely buries only the people who created it. Sometimes, it crushes everyone who ever trusted them. Chapter 13. The truth finds a way. People think secrets stay hidden because liars are clever. They don't. Secrets stay hidden because the people who love you aren't looking for them. Emily never searched through my phone. She never checked my emails. She never questioned where I had been after work. She trusted me completely, and that trust made every lie even heavier. After Rachel told me she was thinking about confessing, I barely slept. Every vibration from my phone made my heart race. Every unexpected call filled me with dread. I kept imagining the same scene over and over again. Emily standing in front of me, holding my phone, looking at me with eyes that no longer recognized the man she married. A week passed, then another. Rachel kept her distance. Emily continued believing everything was normal. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to think we might survive this. I was wrong. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. There were no dramatic arguments, no mysterious phone calls, no anonymous messages, just one simple mistake. I came home late after another long meeting. Emily was already preparing dinner. "I'll be down in a minute," I called as I walked upstairs to change my clothes. Without thinking, I left my phone on the kitchen island, unlocked, something I had done 1,000 times before. While I was upstairs, my phone lit up. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. Emily wasn't trying to invade my privacy. She simply glanced at the screen, assuming it might be something important. Then another message appeared. I can't live with this anymore. Emily froze. A third message followed almost immediately. Every time I see you, I remember that night in Milwaukee. My wife didn't open the conversation. She didn't need to. Those two notifications were enough. When I walked back downstairs, Emily was standing exactly where I had left her. The stove was still on. The pasta water was boiling, but she wasn't moving. She was holding my phone in both hands. She looked at me. Not with anger. Not yet. With confusion. The kind of confusion that comes just before your entire world falls apart. Ethan. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. What is this? Every excuse I had rehearsed disappeared. I looked at the phone, then at my wife. I could have lied. I could have said it was a misunderstanding. I could have blamed anyone but myself. Instead, I said nothing. Silence can be an answer. Emily noticed. She looked down at the screen again, then back at me. Slowly, tears began filling her eyes. No. She shook her head. No. Tell me I'm wrong. Please. Tell me I'm misunderstanding this. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. That was all she needed. Her hands started trembling. Rachel, she whispered her best friend's name, as though saying it out loud might somehow make it less real. My Rachel? The pain in her voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't just the pain of a wife discovering betrayal. It was the pain of losing the two people she trusted most in the world. Finally, I forced the words out. I'm sorry. The moment those words left my mouth, Emily's entire expression changed. The confusion disappeared. The hope disappeared. All that remained was heartbreak. She placed my phone gently on the kitchen counter. She didn't throw it. She didn't scream. She didn't hit me. Somehow, that hurt even more. She looked straight into my eyes. One tear rolled down her cheek, then another. How long? I couldn't lie anymore. It started a few months ago. She closed her eyes. Was Milwaukee the first time? I felt my knees grow weak. She already knew. I nodded. She covered her mouth as a quiet sob escaped her. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. The only sound in the house was the boiling water overflowing onto the stove. Finally, Emily whispered something that shattered me more than anything else. I defended you. Her voice cracked. When people told me no marriage was perfect, I defended you. When Rachel cancelled our plans, I defended her. I trusted both of you. With tears streaming down her face, she looked at me one last time. You didn't just break my heart, Ethan. You destroyed the only two people I thought would never betray me. She slipped off her wedding ring, placed it beside my phone, and walked toward the front door. I called her name. She didn't turn around. The door closed softly behind her, and in that quiet sound, my marriage came to an end. Chapter 14. The Last Conversation. The house had never been so quiet. After Emily walked out, I stood in the kitchen for what felt like hours. Her wedding ring was still lying beside my phone. Two small objects. Together, they represented everything I had destroyed. I wanted to run after her. I wanted to explain. But explain what? There was no explanation that could undo what I'd done, no sentence that could erase months of lies. I called her, straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I texted. Please let me explain. No reply. A few minutes later, another message appeared. Not from Emily, from Rachel. She knows. I stared at those two words, then I typed back. Yes. A moment later, my phone rang. It was Rachel. I answered without speaking. She was crying. I just talked to her. My heart sank. What happened? She called me. I couldn't lie. I told her everything. I closed my eyes. Everything? Rachel sobbed. Everything. There was a long silence between us. Neither of us had anything left to hide. Neither of us had anything left to protect. The truth was finally out, and it was even more painful than I had imagined. The next morning, I drove to Emily's parents' house. I knew that's where she would go. Her father opened the front door. He looked at me for several seconds without saying a word. Then he stepped outside and quietly closed the door behind him. I think you should leave. I just want to talk to her. He shook his head. No, she doesn't want to see you. I made a terrible mistake. His eyes filled with disappointment. No, Ethan. You made hundreds of choices. Those words hit harder than any punch could have. Because he was right. This wasn't one mistake. It was months of decisions, one after another. I loved her. I know you did. He sighed. That's what makes this even harder to understand. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I will never forget. When Emily was 10 years old, her best friend promised they'd always protect each other. When she married you, she told us she finally had two people she trusted with her whole heart. He looked directly into my eyes. You were both those people. And now, she has neither. I couldn't answer. There was nothing left to say. As I turned to leave, the front door opened. Emily stepped onto the porch. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her voice was calm. Ethan, I stopped walking. We need to finish this. Her father quietly went back inside, giving us privacy. Emily folded her arms. I have one question. I nodded. Did you ever love her more than me? I answered immediately. No. I never stopped loving you. A tear rolled down her cheek. That's what hurts the most. I frowned. What do you mean? She looked away for a second before answering. If you had fallen out of love with me, maybe I could understand. But you loved me, and you still chose to betray me. I had no response, because she was right. She continued quietly. I spent weeks wondering what I did wrong. Was I working too much? Did I stop paying attention to you? Was I not enough? She shook her head. But I finally realized something. This wasn't my failure. It was yours. Those words broke something inside me. She slipped a folded envelope into my hands. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce papers. I stared at them without opening them. Emily took one slow breath. I hope one day you forgive yourself. I looked up, surprised. She continued. Because I won't spend the rest of my life hating you. But I also can't spend it married to you. She stepped backward toward the door. Then she stopped one last time. Oh, if Rachel calls you, tell her I don't hate her either. I just don't have room in my life for people who break my trust. The door closed, not with anger, not with violence, just quietly. And somehow, that quiet goodbye hurt more than any scream ever could. Standing alone on the porch, holding the divorce papers in my hands, I finally understood something that had taken me months to see. Losing a marriage isn't always the moment your spouse walks away. Sometimes, you lose it long before. The day you stop protecting the person who trusted you most. Chapter 15. What my choice cost me. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. There were no dramatic courtroom arguments, no fight over money, no endless legal battles. Emily only wanted one thing: freedom. I signed every document without hesitation. I knew I had lost the right to ask for anything more. She kept the house. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city. The first night there, I sat on the floor because I hadn't even unpacked my furniture. The silence was overwhelming. For years, I had complained that our house felt too quiet. Now I understood what real loneliness sounded like. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. A few weeks after the divorce, Rachel asked if we could meet one last time. We met at the same coffee shop where we had once laughed about work and life. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us knew where to begin. She looked different, tired, older, not because of time, but because of guilt. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said quietly. I nodded. "I'm glad." She looked into her coffee for several seconds. "I keep thinking that maybe if Emily had never introduced us." I gently shook my head. "No, this isn't her fault. It's ours," she sighed. "I lost my best friend." "I know. I'd give anything to go back." So would I. There was nothing romantic left between us. Whatever we had thought we felt, it couldn't survive what it had cost. Before leaving, Rachel looked at me one last time. "I don't think we should ever see each other again." I nodded. "I agree." She stood up. "Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye." That was the last time I ever saw Rachel. Months turned into years. Life moved forward. Emily rebuilt hers. Through mutual friends, I heard that she stayed at the Children's Hospital and eventually became director of pediatric nursing. I also heard she had started smiling again. Knowing that brought me relief, not because I expected another chance. I knew there would never be one. But because she deserved happiness, even if I wasn't part of it. As for me, I stayed at the same company for another 2 years before leaving. I eventually found a quieter job with fewer responsibilities. The promotions I once chased no longer mattered. The expensive house, the overtime, the endless meetings, none of it had been worth the price I paid. Sometimes people ask whether cheating was worth it. The answer is simple: no, not for a single second. One night of selfishness cost me a woman who loved me without conditions. It destroyed a friendship that had lasted more than 20 years. It damaged families who had trusted us, and it left me with memories I can never erase. If I could speak to the younger version of myself, the man who answered Rachel's first message, who believed he was only being kind, who thought he was too strong to cross the line, I would tell him this: the biggest mistakes in life rarely begin with one terrible decision. They begin with small choices you convince yourself don't matter. Protect your marriage before you have to repair it. Talk to your spouse before you talk to someone else. Set boundaries before emotions replace judgment. And never mistake attention for love. I can't change what I did. I can't ask Emily to trust me again. I can't undo the pain I caused. All I can do is tell the truth, not to earn forgiveness, not to make excuses, but in the hope that someone listening to my story will stop before making the same choices I did. Because trust takes years to build, only moments to destroy. And sometimes, a lifetime isn't long enough to earn it back. Sometimes I drive past the neighborhood where Emily and I built our life together. I don't stop anymore. I don't have the right. I simply keep driving, remembering the man I used to be, and wishing I had understood one simple truth much sooner. Love doesn't disappear overnight. It fades every time you choose someone else over the person who trusted you most. If you're listening to my story while your marriage is still intact, don't wait until it's too late. Put down the phone. Go talk to your husband. Go hug your wife. Tell them the truth while you still can. Because once trust is gone, no apology, no matter how sincere, can bring back the life you destroyed. My name is Ethan Walker. This is the greatest regret of my life, and I hope it never becomes yours.